Welcome to the Pathway to Mastery. We're so glad you've made the decision to join us on this incredible business building journey. My name is Jamie Nowak, a former client and now presenter here at Buffini & Company, and I am honored to be your guide. This curriculum is born from several decades of hard-earned experience in the trenches of the real estate industry. And now, having trained over 3 million people in 37 countries and coaching tens of thousands, Buffini & Company has created a framework with this training program to transform your business. Throughout our time together, our chairman and founder, Brian Buffini, will be sharing this wisdom and practical application with all of us. If you're new to the business or a real estate veteran, Brian will share the systems, the tools, and the techniques to help you be a master in this industry and of your business. Sit back, but don't relax. Take copious notes in your workbook and get ready to journey on the pathway to mastery.
Top of the morning to you, and welcome to the Pathway to Mastery. My name is Brian Buffini, and my goal in this session with you today is to prepare you for the training program you're about to embark on. What I'm about to share with you is critical to your overall success with this program. Have you ever thought about the concept of mastery? Have you ever considered that you could become a master at your chosen profession? Each of us has the potential to be a master. Now, if you'll embrace this training program and apply what you've learned, you will, over time, become a master. At Buffini & Company, we've spent more than 2 decades training the highest producing agents in the industry. You are going to surge past your current competitors. In the Pathway to Mastery, the Essentials course will help you build a business that's defined by its high level of production. Our Advanced course will help you develop such a successful business that you will become a person of influence. And the Legacy class is designed to help you build a business that you can sell or pass on to the next generation. Now, I'm not the first guy to think about these concepts of mastery. A wonderful book that's helped me along the way is this book, Mastery, by George Leonard. But George didn't discover this either. People have been striving for mastery since time immemorial. The best example we have in our world today of this process and the pathway to follow is in the martial arts. Now, I don't know if any of you here have participated in the martial arts at all, and I might have to keep you at my distance if you do. But when you start out with the martial arts, you start out at the most essential, fundamental level. You start with a white belt. And you're taught kind of the foundational, essential elements. There is no point in moving on to the next belt until you've really mastered this level. Does that make sense? So you got to get really good at this belt before you go on to a yellow belt. And then there's a whole series of other belts till you get to being a black belt. And it's a journey. And we say, oh, that's great. The fact of the matter is, all of learning looks like this. If you want to take on an instrument and learn how to play an instrument, it's the same thing. Now, what do we typically want to do? I want to hear a song, play that song. If I could just play that song, that'd be great. And I've done that. I loved the song The Entertainer. You guys remember that? And I heard it in the movie The Sting when I was a kid, and I learned to play that song. But I didn't learn the fundamentals of how to read music. I didn't learn all those other things. I took all the shortcuts, and today I don't even know how to play that song. Okay? And so that's very common. A lot of people do that in their business. And there's a pathway to follow. And I know all about this pathway. And as I stand here before you today, I've certainly gotten to the point where I've mastered some things in the business world and mastered some things in the area of real estate, but that's not where I started. I started way below a white belt. They don't have a color belt. I was an Irishman, so maybe they were giving me a green belt, but it was actually a black and blue belt. So I'm going to give you context to this so you can understand, if this guy can start there and end up here, if he can do it, maybe I can do it. And so, just briefly, my story is I grew up in Dublin, Ireland. I'm the son of a 5th-generation painter and decorator. And they had my father and his grandfather, they had a painting business for over 150 years. And I came to America, and I was on a holiday, actually. I was just before my 19th birthday. And I got into a very serious motorcycle accident. So I ended up in this car crash. I have compound fractures. I got gangrene. They were going to amputate my leg. It was a very serious deal. And I knew I was in trouble when the person in the ambulance says, well, what's your insurance? And I said to him, what's insurance? I didn't know what that meant in America, but they put me on a journey. They sent me to a hospital. They worked it out for me. And here's a picture of me in my first, there it is. There's right in the hospital bed. This is 5 weeks in. So I kind of started my American journey on the wrong side of the whole deal. I came to America with $92. I didn't know that was the highlight for a while, okay? Because things got much worse. So by the time I'm 20 years of age, I owe over $250,000 in bills, which in today's money would be a couple of $1 million. So that's where I started. And I did a bit of everything. I sold T-shirts at the beach. I worked in a photo mat. I was a security guard at night at the La Jolla Cove Motel. I was a security guard with a cast all the way up to my hip. I used to walk around with my little uniform on and say, if I catch you, I'm going to kill you, let me tell you, okay? So there wasn't a lot of high pursuit going on in my security work. And while I was doing that, I was living in an area in San Diego called Hillcrest, and there was a real estate company, and it had a sign in the window that says, "We train rookies." And I went in and I talked to this one guy, and I'm having a conversation with him. The broker wasn't there yet, and this guy's name was Bill Johnson. And I says to Bill, well, what's the real estate business? Oh, he goes, it's fabulous. And he looked like $1 million. And he says, it's a fabulous business. Oh, it's the greatest business. You're looking at homes, you show people properties, it's great, you get paid lots of money. It's just fantastic. And then he hands me his business card. Now, first of all, this business card was the most unique thing I'd ever seen. You know, growing up in Ireland, business cards were white cardstock with black writing on them. This guy had a picture of himself on his business card. In fact, this picture looked so good, I didn't even recognize him sitting in front of me there. I'm like, totally different looking, you know what I'm saying? Then the bottom left-hand corner of that business card, he had a gold star, and inside the gold star, it said these words, $1 Million Club. Now, I'm a poor immigrant from the south side of Dublin. I'm a house painter's son. I got in the midst of this rehabilitating this motorcycle accident that took a long time, and I'm broke. And this is the first time in my life I've met a real-life, genuine millionaire. Never met a millionaire before, because I didn't know the code. I didn't know the code that $1 Million Club meant he sold $1 million, not made $1 million. I didn't know the code that selling $1 million means you gross 30 grand. And then you have to pay the broker and the splits and the expenses. And so you made about 16 or 17 grand. I didn't know that the guy should have had a food stamp on his business card, not a gold star. I didn't know that, but it was very attractive. And I met the next agent, and they handed me a card. And guess what their card said? $1 Million Club. There were 17 agents in that office. I met about half of them that day, and they all gave me a business card, and every one of them had $1 Million Club. And I am like, I am here. I have landed in the land of milk and honey. The streets are lined with gold in America. I've made it. I've stumbled in on one leg into this, and I go, well, how many years do I have to go to college? Not at all. How much money do I need to have? A couple of $100 and you're in. They gave me a home study course to study my real estate license, and before I knew it, I had a real estate license. And so here I was, starting out. And I started at the very bottom. So here I am, I'm 20 years of age, I have a license, I have no money, I got a ton of medical bills. I had a half cast on my leg at this stage, so I could wear pants over it. And they said, well, what should I do first? And the agents in the office said, why don't you do an open house? In fact, I have a house I have for sale. Why don't you hold it open this Sunday? What a nice opportunity. Now, I wasn't very familiar with the areas and the landscape at the time, but let's just say this. In this neighborhood at night, there sounds like a lot of firecrackers are going off. It was a little rougher neighborhood, if you know what I mean. And a little old boy from Ireland kind of stuck out in that neighborhood, and I'm there holding the house open, and I'm there putting out the signs, and just couldn't be happier. So I meet this lady, and she walks through the house. This lady was a Hispanic lady. Her grandkids, I later found out, called her 4x4 because she was 4 foot tall and 4 foot wide, okay? She had like sauce spilled on her blouse. And she walks through this house, and she's looking at me up and down. She walks through the house. She says, she asked me 2 questions. I knew nothing. But I said, I don't have the answer, but let me get back to you. So I got her information. I said, I'll promise I'll call you tomorrow. So I call her tomorrow. Her name was Anna De Leon. And I go, Anna, Brian Buffini calling, how are you doing? I wanted to follow up with you. You asked me a couple of questions. I talked to the agent that has the home listed. Here's what he said. She goes, you called me back. I said, yeah. I said I would. She goes, they never call me back. She goes, I go to open houses every weekend. They never call me back. She goes, Tuesday night, come by my house. Here's the address. I have a house I want to buy for my grandson. That, I didn't know much about business, but I knew that was a hot lead. Are you guys with me? Now, the problem is at the time, I'm not exaggerating this, I didn't have a car. So now I'm a realtor without a car. I didn't have a full use of my legs, and I didn't have a car. Okay? I'm starting at the very bottom. So I came to a friend of mine I'd met at a church. His name was Mike Taylor. And Mike let me borrow his son's car. He had a teenage son. And his son was a big fan of a band called the Grateful Dead. And he drove what he called a Deadhead mobile. And I'm going to show you, this is the picture of that car when it was put up for sale. This is actually its best side. This is the car I went on my first appointment with. Okay? The driver's side is caved in. That's what you can't see. It's actually caved in, and there was a bungee cord holding that door to the other door. True story. And so this is where I started. In fact, the way you had to get into the car was you keep the passenger door window down, you'd unhook the bungee cord, keep the tension, get in, close the door, hook it up, and then kind of do the limbo to get over into the driver's seat. So I show up at my first appointment. And I got a white shirt and a black tie, and I'm in the car, and I'm driving along. I get to the house, and the little boy runs out of the house, and he goes, who are you? And I said, I'm the realtor. And he goes running ahead of me like the town crier, announcing my arrival to the house. And he goes, Grandma, the realtor's been in a car wreck. That's how I started my first appointment. Okay? I came and I sat with Anna De Leon. She said, you followed up with me. She goes, that tells me a lot. She goes, if you do everything you say with me, I'll help you. So she said, this is the house I want to get. It was up the street. Honest to God, I had a practice form filled out, and I'm trying to practice the form. She goes, give it to me. She fills in all the paperwork for me. She writes in my commission. She signs it. She gives me the earnest money. She tells me this is what's going to happen. They're going to negotiate back this way. Then you're going to get it signed, and then you're going to work and get this transaction closed for me. And that's what happened. Now you can say, man, you were in the right place at the right time. But I did something very early on that I learned, that you can stand out amongst your competition if you'll do the essentials. The first essential is I followed up. The most basic thing in the world. She said, they never call me back. They prejudge who she is, what she is, and what she has. Anna De Leon bought from me 10 homes over the years, one for each one of her grandchildren. She was a multi-millionaire. They had a little restaurant in the barrio in San Diego, and whenever they made profit, that profit went into a piece of real estate. Are you guys with me? And I learned right off the bat, if I learn to do the most basic fundamentals, I can start here, but I'm in the land of opportunity. I'm in the business of opportunity. I can get to where I want to go. Within 3 years from that date, I was the number 5 realtor in the state of California. Okay? Now I could afford a suit that almost fit me. Okay? 2 more years after that, I was number 5 in the entire country. And then I built a team. So now I'm building a team at the time when they didn't even have teams in real estate. This is my transaction coordinator, the great Pat Moore. And I had a team, and I developed buyer's agents. The real estate companies didn't know what to do with me. Thankfully, real estate companies today have great solutions in place for teams. But back then, they didn't. So I was I was a great recruiter for my broker. I was his biggest producer. I loved my colleagues, but he said, you got to go. You got to go, because we can't have you in here. We don't know what to do. We don't know the legalities of it. And it was an amicable thing. But I actually ended up having to start my own brokerage, which I didn't want to do, and I wouldn't recommend for most. But that's what I had to do. So I started Buffini Real Estate. That's my boy AJ in the picture now. Okay, he's a big grown man who's married and kids and everything today. So I'm dating myself. So I started would you say kind of whatever levels below white belt, that's where I started? Well, that's not where it ended up. And if I can do it, you can do it. And what happened for me was very early on in my American experience, I was told by a colleague in my office to go to a seminar. Now, I had just never been exposed to seminars in Ireland. Personal growth was not part of our culture. What is personal growth? Does that mean you have 6 pints of Guinness instead of 5? What does that mean? I don't know. Now, it's a little different there today, but growing up, personal growth was unheard of. There was no self-help section in the Irish bookstores, and America's had this great history of self-help and personal growth and development back to Russell Conwell with Acres of Diamonds in the 1860s. But that was not the case, and it's not the case still most places in the world. So I went to a seminar. Now, will you hear this? My first seminar I ever went to, I heard Jim Rohn speak. I heard Zig Ziglar speak, and Rohn talked about my philosophy and how I thought. Zig Ziglar motivated me and taught me the power of motivation. Tommy Hopkins was there, and he taught me sales skills. And Lou Holtz was there, and he coached me up. That was the first seminar I ever went to. I did pretty good, don't you agree? And that was the first experience of what I had of a peak type experience. That exposed me. It opened up my eyes to this concept of learning, this concept of growth. Little did I know, years later, those men would become amongst my best friends. But that first day, it just opened my eyes. There's a whole other world out there. And I can be more than who I am, and I can become fully who I was designed to be. And that the caterpillar can turn into a butterfly. It's supposed to turn into a butterfly. White belts are supposed to become black belts. We're all that way. And so it's one of the reasons I'm kind of in the business I'm in today. Because that started a journey that kept on. Now, one of the things that'll happen is as you grow and as you develop and as you really progress, one of the things that'll happen for you is as you bring in information, it does what's called a ricochet effect. And ricochet is like a bullet popping around your head, but it's a bullet of information. It's bang, 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 bang. And what it does is it sparks to life things that you think, thoughts that you've had, dreams that you've had, values you've been trained and taught in, and things you've picked up along the way. So when you get this new information, this is going to happen to you during our training programs. We're going to teach you some fantastic stuff, but some of the best stuff that's going to happen, it's going to reawaken in you thoughts and ideas or values you've already had in there. They're just laying dormant. Does that make sense? And that's what happened to me. So what I did with my real estate business is as I started to grow, started to learn, started making personal growth and development and professional development my lifestyle, which it's remained decades later, it also brought up for me some old-time principles. Brought me back to Ireland in many ways, back to my father and my grandfather. Here's my grandfather, Harry Buffini. Now, people always ask me, how does an Irishman have an Italian name? That right there. Doesn't he look like a paisano right there? He was the man. Look at that head of hair on him, okay? And smoked cigars every day of his life. Now, what I don't understand is my house burned down in a fire. Look at this picture. All his furniture was covered in plastic. He smoked cigars every day. His house never burned down. When I get to heaven, that's one of the questions I have forgot. How did that happen? But I learned principles from him. He was like the Mr. Miyagi of the Buffini family, and he shared principles of why they had a painting business that went on for 5 generations, and why they had so many customers, and why they got so many referrals. So along with this new information came these old principles. And then you put them together, and you continue to develop. Now you start on your pathway. And over the last 30 plus years, I've learned how to do a lot of different things. One thing I really committed to was I was going to master my craft. You see, I grew up in a painting family where we just weren't painters. You know, a painter is somebody with a brush and a bucket. In America, if you have a spray gun and a truck, you're a painter. We had to go through an apprenticeship, 4 years. We had to serve our time. We had to start at the most basic level. Here's how you hold a brush. Here's how you fill. Here's how you, the most basic things. We spent every summer with our grandfather in his house, teaching us the basics, the essentials. And then, as you learned your craft, the next thing you know, we're not just doing painting, we're doing gold leaf. We're laying down silk wallpaper. We're doing some of the highest finish works. Our family served all the embassies in Dublin, would always have the Buffini family. And you walk into these ornate places, and all of a sudden you're real glad you learned those essentials as a kid of how to handle this stuff, because now all of a sudden it really matters. You're working around works of art and things that were worth fortunes for these different countries that had their embassy right there in Dublin. Are you guys with me? And so I learned to master my craft. I decided to master my craft in real estate. I wasn't going to get good at it. I was going to get great at it. I was going to be a black belt in this. And so along the way, here's some of the things I learned. I learned how to master buyers and sellers. And I'm going to share some of that with you here today. I'm going to share with you the essentials of that in this program. I learned how to become a master negotiator, because being a good negotiator is the difference between getting paid and not, closing the deal or not. It's the most referable skill that you can have in real estate when people tell their friends about you. And it also makes the process more enjoyable. When you master negotiation, people go from that was a terrible process to that was a great process. Does that make sense? I learned business planning. One of my clients was a man named Dr. Alex Lackey. He was in the who's who as the most organized man in America. I was a realtor, which makes me a chaos agent by nature. He taught me how to manage my time. He introduced me to people who I went to classes and events that helped me set goals. And then I learned along the way how to not only learn the ways of money, but master the ways of money. So business planning, your time, your money, and your goal setting. Powerful stuff. That's what we're going to cover in this Essentials course. But I kind of want to walk you through. I just want to give you an example. And so, because right now, this sounds a bit ethereal, I wanted to tell you my story, because, man, if that guy can start there and end up here, where can I go? And I want to show you an example of this and how it shows up in real estate. So let's say you have a white belt realtor. And this white belt realtor gets one buyer lead a month. So over the course of a year, they get 12 buyer leads. Okay? The average agent in the United States sells 6.7 homes. Okay? So one buyer a month. So this person here, they're kind of a white belt. They're working hard. Their income's on the line. They're trying hard. They're sincere, honest, earnest. But they close about 50% of these, and they make 6 sales. Here's why you want to master your craft. Is that while you're serving the same number of leads, radically different things happen. So first of all, as a black belt, I'm going to share with you along the way how to go this path and working with buyers. In the last 5 years of my real estate career, I never lost a single buyer who had an appointment with me. If a buyer had an appointment with me, I never lost them in 5 years. Now, I'm not trying to brag on here. I'm trying to impress upon you the difference between a white belt and a black belt. And this doesn't happen by accident. This doesn't happen because you were you fell out of bed and you were blessed with the mastery gene. We're all blessed with it. It takes a lot of work and a lot of practice. So now what would happen is this. My goal with every single buyer was that prior to closing. So first of all, if I got 12 of them, right off the bat, I was getting 12 sales. Okay? But my goal was to get at least 2 referrals from every buyer prior to closing. 1 buyer, 2 referrals, every time. Every time. And I wanted to average that. Now, some people referred at higher rates than others. Does that make sense? Everybody didn't refer to. Some people did 5 and 6, and some did none. Does this make sense? But now, all of a sudden, from the same 12 leads, now over here, I'm at 36. 36 versus 6. You tell me. 36, there's good eating over there. And by the way, you're not working that much harder. You're just that much more skilled, that much more proficient. Does this make sense? And I've done this many times in my life. Once I learned how to do this in real estate, I've done it in many areas of my life, in many of the businesses I own. In the same way I approach real estate investing in my own net worth. I realized, okay, I'm going to be open, I'm going to learn. I realize I'm a novice, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to take my time, and I'm going to commit to the process of building my fortune over time, whether it be with owning real estate, whether it be running a business. Now, I became so successful in the real estate business as a young age. I was 26 years of age, and I was being asked to speak at conferences. And so for a couple of years, I went out and I would spend time sharing what I did and how I did it. And the agents were going, man, we need more of this. What do you do? How do you do it? What are the systems? What are the routines? What do you do? So finally I said, okay. And I said, I'm going to do this. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the speaking. I'm an Irishman. I like talking. I like telling stories. And I like to teach. And I was a person who was blessed by other people who taught me. Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, Brian Tracy, Stephen Covey, Earl Nightingale, all of these people, Og Mandino, all these people, the books they wrote, the seminars they gave, the tapes they made. If you're young, Google tapes, okay? And so that kind of inspired me, and I felt like, okay, I'm getting this. I've been blessed by this. I want to pass the torch on. So I did it, and I volunteered that for a couple of years. But then I started doing this. Okay, I'm going to do this in addition to my real estate practice. And so in 1996, here I am giving my first ever seminar. Okay, look at that young, innocent pup. Oh, if only I could talk to him. And guess what happened? I started at the very bottom as a presenter. I was back below being a white belt in presenting. Does that make sense? And so I had to start from scratch. But I had learned this in real estate. And I had learned the pathway to mastery. And I learned there's a methodology. So what's happened? Well, over 2,000 seminars later, I've trained over 3 million people in 37 countries. And now when I go speak, there's 3, 5, 10,000 people at the conferences. Or they're broadcast to everywhere around the country and overseas. It's grown from there. We do a podcast, been downloaded by millions and millions of people in 160 countries. You know, and as you get good at something, see, when you master something, no matter what it is, one of my favorite verses is, show me a man skilled in his labor, he'll serve before kings. And along the way, this son of a house painter, who was the guy with the cast, who was a security guard at the motel down in La Jolla. Now, all of a sudden, this guy's meeting with world leaders and presenting all over the world. And I'm not going to just name drop to heaven here, but I'm just going to give you an example of this. I'm telling you my story. I kind of have a hard time believing it myself. Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon. I loved the American space program. I got to get him to come to speak at our events. Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar, who were great heroes of mine, we spoke together at multiple events. They came to our events many times, okay? And there's sports stars, whether it be Magic Johnson, entertainers like Jay Leno, politicians like Rudy Giuliani. I can put hundreds of names up there and say, hang on a second here. This was the fella that came to the country with 92 books and everything went south. And it wasn't that I was born with this magical gene. And I want to share with you, that's the greatest power and the passion I have in what I do today, is I know how ordinary a fellow I am, but I got exposed to some extraordinary information. And over time, it's changed my world. And if you want to change your world and become who you're destined to be, first of all, we get your production up. Then you become so successful, you become a person of influence. Your business becomes a business of influence in your community. And then ultimately on to a life of significance where you're giving back all the time. Very, very powerful. And there's not a person we haven't coached, met as a company, there's not a person I haven't met in an event world, or a person we haven't trained who didn't have that beautiful gene. All children of God, all made in the image, and all with those same talents. Does that make sense? To do what they're supposed to do. So if does that sound appealing to you guys? Yeah. Would you kind of like to master your profession and find your way to serve before kings yourself? Become a person of influence? So that's what this is about. So you have a workbook in front of you, and I have a definition of mastery. We're going to get it down, and we're going to get into a teaching time here where I hope to kind of give you some nuts and bolts. So first of all, it's superior knowledge of a subject or skill. Superior. Not in regards to you're over the top of somebody, you're just better. Superior knowledge of a subject or skill in the pursuit of an accomplishment. Superior knowledge of a subject or skill in the pursuit of an accomplishment. It's a beautiful definition. Okay? So you just know your stuff, you're highly skilled at it, and you're pursuing accomplishments. Does that sound good to you? That's the pathway. Now, by the way, it's not 3 easy payments in $19.95, and you can have it in 30 days. Now, I'm sorry to say this. I love everything about America. I became an American by choice. I became a citizen about 20 years ago. Here's what I want to tell you. I love America, but there's one dynamic here, is that American culture is not conducive to mastery. American culture is conducive to quick fixes. I'm going to take an 8-week course, and I will be a master. No, you will learn the tools to have a peak to then get on the road to mastery. Does that make sense? You just got to want it. You just got to understand that those gifts, they take time. It requires time. So here's the first thing about mastery. It's a journey. It's a journey. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What a brilliant statement. The pursuit is where the happiness is, because you're on the pathway to mastery. George Leonard, who wrote the book Mastery, said this: Mastery is a journey, and the master must have the courage to risk failure. Oh, man. You can see why this is why I'll never have an infomercial. Okay? This might take a while, and there might be failure along the way. 3 easy payments in 1995, 6-minute abs. You follow? I mean, I spent 6 minutes looking for my abs one time. I know they're in there somewhere. Okay? Just not the way it is. Next, it's a lifelong commitment to honing your skills. A lifelong commitment to honing your skills. Leaning into the Italian side of my nature and heritage, Michelangelo Buonarroti. He said, if people knew how hard I had to work to gain my mastery, it would not seem so wonderful at all. Okay? At Buffini Company today, I have a studio that's built out for the podcast. It's called the Nightingale Studio, named after Earl Nightingale. And there's a brass plaque underneath that sits behind my desk every day, and it says, Ancora imparo. That's a phrase from Michelangelo, and it says, I am still learning. Okay? I am still learning. That's what he said at the end of his life. I am still learning. The man who gave us so many works of art. Now here's a key ingredient. Mastery is a series of peaks and valleys. A series of peaks and valleys. I want to walk you through it. This is kind of what it looks like. Now, this is not perfect because life has some curves into it, but this is a good example. So you're here and you jump up and you go, boom. So like when I went to that event over 30 years ago, boom, that was a peak experience. Now, what people think is I want to live up here. No, then you kind of end up, you kind of retreat back, and then you have this long, challenging time here. It feels challenging, and it's the plateau. And if you can persevere through the plateau, you will become a master. Here's the principle. Most time spent at a skill level is spent on a plateau. Okay? This is what it feels like. All right? And the great Bruce Lee, he was kind of a master, right? Here's what he said. There are no limits, they're just plateaus, but you must not stay there, you must go beyond them. All right? And so this happens in people have production plateaus. People get stuck. I do 3 million a year, I do 5 million a year. I've reached this kind of ceiling. Have you guys ever experienced that? It's like I can't seem to get past it. Well, working harder is not the answer. Putting in more hours is not the answer. Buying more leads is not the answer. Spending more money is not the answer. Investing your time is the answer. Invest in your time, and I'll show you what to invest your time on. Lack of movement, what it does and how it feels, it causes frustration. Lack of movement causes frustration. I want to share with you an example from nature. I first heard about this from Zig Ziglar in that seminar over 30 years ago, and I thought, you know, an Irishman, sometimes Irish people, you know, were great storytellers, right? And every village would have what's called a shanachie. And a shanachie is an old storyteller, and every pub out in rural Ireland has a shanachie, and the people just gather around, and you buy him a beer, and he'll tell you a great story. And people then say at the end of a story, was that true? And he'll go, it could have been. So when I heard Zig, and he's got that, you know, Yazoo City, Mississippi accent, and he's doing his thing, and he talked about the Japanese bamboo tree. And he said, the Japanese bamboo tree, when it grows, you plant it, you water it, and you fertilize it, and for 5 years, it never breaks ground. So you water, you fertilize it, and it never breaks ground. But when a Japanese bamboo tree first breaks ground, it can grow up to 100 feet in 90 days. Now I said, Zig has a little bit of shanachie in him. So I started researching. Well, there's over 100 species of bamboo, and sure enough, there is a type of Japanese bamboo tree that when you plant it, it will not break ground for up to 5 years. And you water it and you fertilize it, but when it grows exponentially. 100 feet in 90 days is the number. I've met a lot of people like that. Our company's coached a lot of people like that. Now, it didn't take them 5 years to break ground, but we've had people who went, man, this ain't working, this ain't working, this ain't working, this ain't working, bang! And now everybody's coming to him, you're such a success story, how'd you do it? You're an overnight success, how'd you do it? It's a plateau. It's a plateau, and you have to keep growing through the plateau. Let's keep moving on. In hindsight, the plateaus were all peaks. Let me say it again. In hindsight, the plateaus were all peaks. Now, I can tell you, hindsight is the best kind of sight. We all have it. We're all geniuses in hindsight. Is that true? We're anxious in foresight. We're geniuses in hindsight. Here's the way it works. You go through a peak, you go through a plateau. You go and you'll have another peak, settles back down, plateau, and on it goes. Now watch this. That plateau is a far more significant growth pattern. Does that make sense? So, and my son, my youngest son, Adam, said something to me here recently because I was explaining this concept to him. And he said, Dad, what I see is what used to be your goal becomes your standard. Does that make sense? And I thought, man, I'm going to make money with that, son. Because it's true. You know, I had a goal years ago to pay off my medical bills. Pay off all the credit card debt I'd gotten into when I first got here. That became a huge goal. Then it became a standard. I haven't had credit card debt in 25 years. My first goal, I want to buy a car and have a paid off car. I haven't owed money on a car in 25 years. So what used to be a goal becomes a standard. You see the plateau, look at this. Look at this plateau, oh, but I'm not going anywhere. I don't feel like I'm growing. I need to go spend this money on IHaveACrazyIdea.com. I'm going to switch up what I'm doing. I'm working for a great company with a great broker. I got great teammates. But Going Broke Realty just called me. And they offered me this great app. And I'm just going to do it because I don't feel like I'm growing here because I'm just on a plateau. And look at this plateau. And look at this plateau. And look at this plateau. Professional golfer plateaus around shooting 68. Now, there was a time when a professional golfer, man, if I could ever shoot 68, that'd be the greatest thing in the world. But then it becomes, man, I shot 69 today. What's wrong? Are you guys hearing me? This is the key. Look at where you started. That's why it's always important to remember where you came from. Now, I'm going to share with you why there's 3 different ways we approach it and what our tendencies are. Now, I'm going to make everyone feel a little uncomfortable, and I want you to know, me too. I've done this myself, but I want to share with you what your tendencies are, and you have tendencies towards anti-mastery behavior. Okay? Here they are. It's called the Dabbler, the Obsessive, and the Hacker. The Dabbler, the Obsessive, and the Hacker. Okay? So the Dabbler. What does the Dabbler do? It's right there in your workbook. The Dabbler tries many things. Gets some improvement, plateaus, and then gets what? Boring. Boring. Okay? So new to the business. Gets a sale. When you're first in the business, you remember your first sale? It's the greatest thing in the world. And then you get a few sales, and then you have a great month. And then it becomes kind of, well, yeah. And then this buyer is not the greatest. And, you know, the market's not that great. There's not a lot of inventory. You know, the interest rates are going up. This and that, you know, whatever. There's a lot of problems. There's a lot of work, these buyers, you know. And the next thing you know, we get bored. Most people never get the compounding effects of their efforts because they get bored. And when they get bored, they get distracted, and then they try all kinds of crazy stuff. You know, the engine's running pretty smoothly. They throw a wrench in and watch all the pretty sparks fly. I'm going to start another business. I'm going to get into multi-level marketing. I'm going to get into this. I'm going to try a little side business. I'm going to be selling perfume out of the back of my car. Magnets. I've been around business forever. I've watched perfectly solid business people absolutely jack up their careers so many times. Unintentionally. Because they got what? They got bored. The Dabbler sometimes is doing the business part-time. Let me give you a great example of a Dabbler. They never use the word career. Many agents don't use the word career. No, I'm in the real estate business. I'm in the real estate business. Look, I'm in the swimming pool. Okay? I plan to get out. I know people who've been in the business for 20 years and have never considered it a career. They've always viewed it year to year. I can get in. Because it's so easy to get in, it's so optional to get out. Are you guys with me? Are you going to say, no, this is going to be my career? The great Bruce Lee said this. I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. That's the master. That's the opposite of the dabbler. And real estate is a dabbler business. New ideas all the time, new marketing all the time. What? I've been watching it for 30 years. The next is the obsessive, which really works well with the typical real estate personality. Okay? The obsessive is a person who's purely results-oriented. They are very inconsistent because when they hit a plateau, they quit because the results aren't increasing linearly. Okay? So I start here. I just went to the seminar. I went to hear Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, Brian Buffini. I went to the Brian Buffini seminar. Let me tell you, you're not cured. And so people go, that's what I expect. Never a bad day, never a setback, never a difficult year, never a transition year. Okay? We have people who've gone from 10 transactions to 50 to 60 to 70. But here's the thing. Sometimes they'll do 45, and the next year they'll do 42 because they're building infrastructure. They're putting systems, they're hiring assistants. Their computer systems don't work anymore. Are you guys with me? That's not a bad year. Sometimes they're like, oh, I'm doing 50 deals, and next year I did 40 because I'm taking more time off. But I raised my average sales price, cut my expenses. I'm making more money, but I'm actually working less. Does that make sense? The obsessive has what I call shiny object syndrome. So they're like, this isn't growing fast enough, and they constantly undermine their progress. Let me share this with you. People radically overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and radically underestimate what they can get done in a decade. This is so countercultural. Talking about 10 years in a world that we live in today where the social media news hits you and whatever else. Some of you, hopefully you're turned off your phones while you're going through this training program, but some of you get a message while you're here. Hello, hello, hello. And people run around with chickens with their heads cut off. Are you guys with me? That's not how you get to be a master. You stay the course. Okay? Babe Ruth said this, you just can't beat the person who never gives up. Babe Ruth was a master. Big, chunky guy, hard living, party boy, drinking, hanging out all hours of the night and day. But he knew his craft. When it came to baseball, he was a master. He might not have been a master in anything else. But he goes, man, the person I fear is the person who won't give up. You have to persevere on the plateau for the next peak to come. If you will persevere and your mind is open and you follow what I'm going to share with you, the 5 keys to mastery, you will have another peak. Lastly, you have the hacker. The hacker sounds like a golfing term. The hacker is content where they're at. What happens to the hacker is they have a peak, they do better, and then they settle. They're addicted to the comfort zone. What they don't realize is that bit by bit, slowly but surely, the hacker always goes back to square one or worse. You're either growing or dying. You're either getting better or worse. We are human beings. We live in this body, and we're either improving or getting worse. Are you guys with me? Yeah. But we want security. We want safety. We want to feel where we're at. Good. It's just, I'm good. I'm safe. The only safety is in growth. That's the only safety. By the way, if you're growing, it doesn't matter what's happening on the world stage. If you're growing, it doesn't matter what the inventory levels are. If you're growing, it doesn't matter what the interest rates are doing. You're controlling what you can control. You're influencing what you can influence. The other stuff that you get worried about, you can't control that stuff at all. Does that make sense? So, we got the 3 different types. Are you thinking about yourself? Have you dabbled a bit? Have you obsessed a bit? Okay? Have you hacked a bit? We all have. The great Nelson Mandela said this, there's no passion to be found in settling for a life that's less than the one you're capable of living. Okay? What we want you to become is a master of your craft. I want to tell you a story, and this will be a great story for you. Wonderful couple, been in our program for over 2 decades. Now, when we met Bill and Nancy Stewart, Bill had been in a real estate business for over 20 years, and Bill had hit a plateau. And his plateau was $3 million. in production. And he had done that about 7, 8 years in a row. And by his own admission, he said, if I worked really hard, I did about 3 million in production. And if I goofed off, I did about 3 million in production. And the reason being, he had kind of settled. Okay? He'd gotten to that safe zone. There had been a big recession up in Northern California. His wife left the nursing profession, joined him in it. So now she came in and she's wanting to learn from scratch. So she has the white belt eyes. She's like, let's learn from scratch. And she's looking at the things he's doing. And any good wife who's been married to a good man for a lot of years is usually not shy of sharing her opinion. And she goes, Bill, this is goofy. We need to do better than this. We're capable of doing better than this. Well, they began the journey. They began the journey. They came to events. They started in the training programs. They got in coaching. They started following through. Now, their story sounds like this. That's not how it felt to them, okay? But I want to share with you their numbers. Here's their picture right here. Great couple. They went from 3 million in production to 7 million. Is that a good increase? Okay. They went from 7 to 14. Now then they had a year that went 14, 15, 13, 12. And then after they went through that plateau and put some systems in place, they went up to 21 million. Up to 33 million. Up to $42 million in sales. Same guy, 20 years, stuck on the plateau. It's never too late to learn. It's never too late to grow. It's not, oh, Brian, I wish I'd have met you years ago. I always tell the story of Arlene Holt, who started in our coaching program at 80 years of age and had her record year at 94. I want to give you the 5 keys. You guys like this idea of mastery? Yes. Okay. Do you understand that there's work ahead? There are going to be peaks and highs, and there's going to be plateaus when it flatlines. And you got to persevere through them. Here's the 5 things, and we're going to go through this quickly. The 5 keys: surrender, instruction, practice, intentionality, and the edge. Surrender, instruction, practice, intentionality, and the edge. Surrender, instruction, practice, intentionality, and the edge. Okay? Not just a great guitarist for you too, if you know what I mean. So, the first stage is surrender. Now, surrender, that's an emotional disposition of learning, whereby the learner lets go of pride and ego and judgment. The key to surrender is humility and trust. You got to be open to grow. If you're stubborn, if you know everything, if you're closed-minded, that's the best you can do. If you're in a desert and I have just some refreshing cool water, but your cup is upside down, I can pour all I want. If you're not open, it doesn't matter. Have you ever met some closed cups? Have you ever been closed yourself? Ask someone close to you. We all have. So the first key to surrender is you got to be open to grow. You got to be open to grow. Marianne Williamson says, the moment of surrender is not when life is over, it's when it begins. Okay? The second key is instruction. Instruction. Now here's a key. Learning is a verb. It's learning versus what I learned. Are you guys with me? I'll be honest with you. I went through school. I did okay in school because I knew how to take a test. I was not a good student. I wasn't that interested. My principal used to say, Brian Buffini went to sports and played school. Okay? And I did enough to do the test, to pass, to get the stamp. Follow? It was when I got into business, when I started off in tough circumstances, when I got married and started having kids, that's when I became a student. And I've never stopped. Never stopped. So here's what it's all about. It's continual commitment to learn. It keeps you young. It keeps you young. It keeps you growing. It shakes off your skepticism and cynicism. It shakes off the years. Have you ever seen those folks run around in their 90s that are full of life? They're still learning, always. Keeps you going. George Leonard said this, if you intend to take the journey of mastery, the best you can do is to arrange for first-rate instruction. So that's kind of important too. Get the good stuff. Get the good stuff. So we do this at Buffini Company. We have this down to a system. You have these plateaus, and you have a peak. So how do we help people make the jump? Classes like this and events. No question. This should be a peak experience for you. If I'm doing my job right, we've prepared for this for about 9 months to bring this, to engineer this training program, to bring all of the sciences we've learned of coaching tens of thousands of business owners like yourself, to know exactly the action steps to give you, how much work to give you, exactly what you need to master in order to do this. Get down the path, okay? So we have classes and events. Boom! Go through a peak. I'm hoping that happens for you, okay? Again, Cicero said, a mind without instruction can no more bear fruit than can a field, however fertile, without cultivation. That Cicero had a lot of good things to say, didn't he? So how many of you like the ideas of the peaks? And what we want is continual peaks, right? Because peaks really make you feel good. Plateaus make you productive, and they develop your mastery. Peaks, you get a breakthrough. They're fantastic. But then you got to go pay the price. So what do? Training and coaching. That's how we've developed it. That's why our average client earns over 10 times the average of the typical agent. We have a process of peaks and plateaus built in. Our mission is to impact and improve the lives of people. Impact happens here. Improvement happens here. I get thousands of letters and emails every month of people, you've changed my life, changed my life, changed my life. I go, yeah. Okay, I can do a lot of impacting at the events. We have a team of presenters. We have all kinds of the best training in the world, and it gives you impact, but nothing happens without the training and the coaching. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's peak, plateau, impact, improve. Does that make sense? The great John Wooden said this, a good coach can change a game. A great coach can change a life. I got to do a speaking tour with him years and years ago. Oh man, I would have paid, they were paying me. Think about this. They were paying me to speak at an event where I got to spend all day with John Wooden for 10 different cities. I mean, pinch me. But that happens when you become a person of skill. That happens when you're on the journey to mastery. Does that make sense? The third key is practice. The goal of practice is to develop your skills to the point where they become a natural behavior. A natural behavior. Here's a definition in your book. Okay? It's repeated exercise in the performance of an activity or skill. Repeated exercise in the performance of an activity or skill. Now I want you to stop here for a second. When do real estate agents practice their craft? 2 times. It's only 2 times in a realtor's life they practice their craft. Do you know what they are? When they're brand new to the business and they're scared out of their wits, they'll practice. And then after that, they practice in front of their customers. They practice at the kitchen table when everything's on the line. They'll practice when they're on the phone handling a conflict, handling a negotiation in person. That's when realtors